What is up, you guys? Rogue here. In today's video, I am going to be breaking down one of the most used concepts in smart money trading, the fair value gap and the inverse fair value gap. By the end of this, you will know how a gap forms, why price gets pulled toward it, and what happens when a gap fails and flips. I'm going to keep it simple and visual, no imbalance, like no different other wordings. So just the mechanics where you can actually use. So let's get right into it. A fair value gap is a three-candle imbalance, a price range that one side of the market ran through so fast that it left the gap with no two-sided trade. And the price tends to come back and rebalances the gap before continuing. Traders use it as a high probability area to look for entries. So here's the 5 things that mostly defines it. So the fair value gaps are formed across by 3 candles. Candle 1 and candle 3 wicks that don't meet, which causes an imbalance or an inefficiency for candle number 2. It does act as a magnet, which price is drawn back to fill it. Then it continues with the next move, whether it be bearish or bullish. So for this one, candle 1 sets the first reference wick before the move. And then candle 2, which is the displacement inefficiency candle, is the one that makes an aggressive move, whether it be up or down, bullish, bearish, that runs price hard in one direction, which leave this huge gap. And then there comes candle number 3. The gap is the space between candles 1's wick and candles 3 wick that candle 2 skipped. So whether it be bearish or bullish, is same scenario. So with a bullish delivery to the upside. So how it usually forms is that a strong up candle, which is a candle 2 gaps price higher. Candle 1's high never overlap. So you see these 2 wicks, they don't like overlap on top of each other. We only measure the fair value gap from the wick of candle 1 wicks high and the wick of candle number 3 wick low. So same scenario with the bearish FVG. The wick of the candle, the first candle low, and the wick of the third candle high, which leaves a gap. Okay, so I do want to show some fair value gaps or inverse fair value gaps on the chart itself and how it respected or disrespected this fair value gap. So as you can see, I'm on the 15-minute time frame. Your fair value gap would be from this top of the bottom of the wick of candle 1 and the top of the wick of candle 3. This is your fair value gap right here. 1, 2, and 3. So we have a bearish moved, a bearish down, and then here's, you can't really see the wick of the candle, but it's right there. The wick of the candle, the aggressive imbalance second candle, and then the third candle. So we would place the FVG from the top of the bottom of this wick to the top of this wick. As you can see, price drop and rally backed up to the fair value gap, tapped it, and continue its way down. So that is a fair value gap. Now, for an inverse fair value gap, so we have a slight fair value gap on this one. So as you can see, the second candle didn't really have much of an imbalance in here, but we still have from the top of this bottom wick to the top of this one. So for this, as you can see, it violated this fair value gap by closing. So the body of the candle is not supposed to be closing on top of it. So this violated it, which turned it to an inverse fair value gap. So I would go with entry for a long position from this wick. So I'll go mid. From this wick or the top of that fair value gap, go to a 1 to 2 or 1 to 3 risk to reward, or you can even go from the top of this wick right here. And that is your inverse fair value gap. Why does FVGs matter? Why do we care about all this? What's the reason for it? First, they do act as a magnet for price. Market seeks efficiency, so an unfilled gap pulls price back to rebalance that one-sided move before it continue. They do give a precise entry zone, so instead of guessing, you get a defined area to engage with a clear invalidation just beyond it. The displacement that leaves a gap behind is a signal of intent. The gap tells you which way the aggression pushed. They do give you a tight or logical risk. So your stop sits on the far side of the gap. So your risk is small and defined and relative to your target. So putting this together, it gives you like a whole directional read, a defined entry, and logical stop all at once. This is what turns into a repeatable framework instead of just guessing. So now we go into the inverse fair value gap. What is an inverse fair value gap? An inverse fair value gap is just a failed or a flipped in roles. So what happens is price trades through a fair value gap and a candle closes fully on the other side of it, which violates the gap. Okay, so a quick side by side on the difference. So the difference is crystal clear. A fair value gap is a fresh, unfilled imbalance. It is still respected in its original direction, acting as a floor, or if it is bullish or a ceiling as bearish, you trade the rebalances, price returning to fill it. An IFVG or inverse fair value gap is that same gap after it has been violated by a close. Its role has flipped to the opposite direction, and you trade the retest, price returning to the flip zone. Simplest way to remember it is an FVG is the gap doing its original job, and an IFVG is the same gap after it failed, now doing the opposite job. One is the rebalance trade, the other one is the retest after failure. So now let's put it together into something you can actually trade. We mark on your higher time frame bias your key levels before you go hunting for gaps on your lower time frame. So what I basically do is either go on the 4-hour time frame or the 1-hour time frame, look for any of imbalances or fair value gaps to see where price could possibly potentially either return or flip rolls itself or flip either bullish or bearish. But you do have to remember what matters most is that fair value gap is a high probability area, but it is not always guaranteed. There are some fair value gaps that doesn't get filled. So use fair value gap as a tool And if you try to ignore it, they do become as a trap. Lastly, gaps are the market's footprint. A fair value gap is a three candle imbalance that price tends to return and fill. Bullish gap act as floor, or bearish gap act as a ceiling. When a gap gets violated by a close, it inverts into an inverse fair value gap and flip roles. And you trade the return with displacement, confluence, and defined risk. That is the whole concept, start to finish. If this clicked for you, that is exactly what this channel is about. The real mechanics, not the hype. This is Rogue Trades. Trade the gap, respect the risk, and I will see you on the next one.